What happens when a flight attendant questions a quiet man's right to wear a simple cross around his neck without realizing that man is Keanu Reeves? What began as a subtle act of judgment over a silver crucifix turned into a power fulminant that would shake an entire flight, and by the time they landed, no one would forget what he said or how he said it. Oh, Han, before we take off, tell us where our area you're reading this from. We love seeing your reactions. The main hall of Los Angeles International Airport buzzed with its usual chaos. People rushed in every direction. Children pulled colorful rolling bags. Executives typed furiously their smartphones while glancing at flight boards. Amid that frantic crowd, a man walked at a steady, almost onward pace. He wore a plain black shirt, worn-out jeans, and a pair of scuffed sneakers. No designer watch, no flashy accessories, no security. Interjecting the path, it was Keanu Reeves. A few people gave him curious glance. Uncertain could it be seemed, too flickering. Their eyes, but most didn't recognize him. He passed by like any other traveler, maybe even one who seemed slightly out of place in such a polished environment. Tone detail, however, stood out from his understated look. Around his neck, hanging loosely, a small silver crucifix glinted gently under the airport lights. It wasn't large or flashy, but it had presence. There was something about that piece, something heavier than its size. Keanu moved forward without hiding. Just by himself. When he reached the first-class gate, he stepped into the priority line, handed his ticket to the flight attendant on duty. His name was printed clearly on the boarding pass, but the woman in front of him, polished, posture perfect, uniform, sharp gaze, hesitated. For a second, sir, she looked at the tickathon back at him, her brow slightly furrowed. I think you're at the wrong gate. This line is for first class. Keanu didn't look surprised or offended, hesitantly replied with a calm smile. I'm at the right gate. The attendant identified by her name tag. As Carla checked the ticket again, it was legitimate. The name was correct. She knew who Keanu Reeves was, of course, but she hadn't recognized him at first. His casual appearance, the Warrensnaker, the complete lack of celebrity aura, it didn't match the profile she was used to seeing. In first class, even after confirming his identity, she hesitated. Silent bias had already surfaced. She let him pass, but her eyes followed him with unease. He walked slowly down Thickerider and settled into his first-class seat with ease, like someone who had done this many times before. But Carla kept watching. There was something about him that bothered her. Maybe it waste contract simplicity where she expected extra gains, or maybe it was the necklace. The crucifix now fully visible as he adjusted his seatbelt. She froze for a moment, her gaze locked on the tiny symbol. And a flash of tension ran across her face. She said nothing, but took a step forward, then another. She followed him down the aisle with firm, almost terse steps. Her expression had changed, more tense, deliberate. Something inside her had shifted. She lets him board, but when she notices the crucifix in his chest, she suddenly frizzes. Something shifts in her expression. She follows him to his seat with stiff, purposeful steps. The hum of the aircraft was almost therapeutic as the plane climbed steadily into the sky. The world below came a blur of clouds and sun-glinted rooftops inside the first-class cabin. The air was conditioned and crisp, lights dimmed just enough to suggest comfort. Without sleep, Keanu sat still in his seat, arms resting on the padded armrests. His breathing measured, wasn't reading, wasn't watching anything. He was simply being in quiet. His presence drew more attention than noise ever could. The silver crucifix around his neck had shifted slightly during takeoff, now resting fully in view atop his plain black shirt. It wasn't bold, it wasn't polished perfection. In fact, it looked slightly odd, worn at the edges, as if it had lived through decades of stories, and yet that simple piece of metal carried more weight than most could imagine. Carla noticed from the galley she peeked into the aisle just enough to keep an eye on him. Something about the way he sat, so calm, so centered, so unapologetically Fims. It made her run comfortable, and yet she couldn't explain why. She had dealt with celebrities before, loud ones, demanagons, entitled ones, but Keanu didn't fit any of those molds. Still, there was something about him, more mabe, about that necklace, that stirred a strange discomfort in her chest. One she didn't want to name. Moments later, she approached. Her posture was professional, acclaimed. She'd practiced that poise in front of mirrors and training seminars in her own mind every time she had to deal with situations. This wasn't just a flight, it was her domain, and she was determined to uphold its order, Sir Shebagan lowering. Her voice just slight-lied like to remind you that we have ascertained policies regarding overt religious symbolism in shared space. Especially in this cabin, we ask for discretion. Keanu turned to her slowly, his expression unreadable. I'm sorry, is there a rule I've broken? Her voice remained soft, but the undertone sharp. It's not about breaking rules. It's about creating a neutral environment. Some passengers might find certain symbols divisive. He looked down briefly at the crucifix. I flown like this many times before. No one sever had an issue. She hesitated. That wasn't the response she expected. Yes, well, times are changing some. Travelers feel more sensitive these days. We just ask everyone to be considerate. Perhaps you could tuck it in her hand gesturally toward the necklace, like she didn't want to point directly, as if this symbol might burn her fingers. Keanu didn't react with anger, but he also didn't comply. This crucifix isn't a fashion statement. It's not a provocation. It's part of who I am. Carla forced a smile, the kind used to diffuse, not to connect, of course, and we respect that. Wes amply ask that passengers keep personal expressions discreet, especially in premium cabins. Her words, dressed in policy, carried a passive-aggressive bideth woman in the seat across. Thial looked up subtly, tuning in. A mantua rose back, removed one earbud. The air had changed. Something uncomfortable had started to bloom, not loud, not chaotic cut. Palpable. Keanu's voice remained even, controlled. With all respect, I believe in being singled out. Carla blinked. Excuse me. If someone else wore a pendant off, a tree, a star, or a stone, would yousk them too. Hide it. She opened her mouth, closed it, reset. That's not what this is about. Then what is it about? Silence. Shed an answer instead. She cleared her throat, stepped back with a nod, and Sadiel, give you a moment. Keanu looked up again, slower this time. This necklace has oved my life more than once, in war zones, in hospital rooms, and nights. I thought I wouldn't wake from his voice. It didn't rise, but it filled the space like thunder. In a cathedral, I won't hide it now, not ever, for the first time. Carla showed what she was feeling. Her frustration, her disbelief, it cracked through the plastic off. Her customer service expression, it was only a flicker, but it was there, and Avarian saw it. Passengers turned. The energy shifted fully now, no longer uncertain. People began forming silent opinions. A man lifted his phone from Hislop, pointed the camera discreetly toward Thiel. Another whispered to his partner, is that really Q Reeves? But Keanu didn't notice the shift. He wasn't trying to create one. He was simply standing still, holding a boundary. Others thought soft. Carla, sensing Thelis of control, straightened again. If you refuse, I'll have to escalate this. Tough, Captain. You do what you need to. Dose's eyes met hers now with quiet strength. But know this, the problem isn't what's in your eyes. A silence so complete fell over Thekabin, it might as well have been outer space. Even Nicole stepped back slightly. She felt it, not just the power of the words, but the truth in them. Carla panned her mouth and closed it again. Shahad, nothing to say, and everyone knew it. Keanu says with firm calm, this necklace saved my life more than once, and I went hide it. Carla's professional mask cracks her irritation now fully visible. Plane had reached cruising altitude. Side clouds drifted in slow motion beneath. The wings inside the first-class cabin hummed with a quiet, circling seats, champagne flutes, the occasional clinking of silverware. Bouton corner of the cabin buzzed with a different kind of energy. The aftershock off, a confrontation no one had expected to witness. Keanu sat silently in Hysia, unmoved. The crucifix still hung over his shirt, resting peacefully above his heart. Carla returned her steps, not wicker and more rigid, carried a newage. She stopped beside his seat. Lips dyed, expression neutral, but this time there was no attempt to disguise the tension in her tone. Sir, I've received a few comments from other passengers. Some ear feeling uneasy. She spoke in Thatsum, carefully measured voice, the one that tried to sound objective, but cold and quite hide its sooner tone. Keanu looked at her calm. Abutua. Carla paused. The answer was obvious bet. She hesitated to say it outright about the display of ideological symbolson, a shared enclosed environment. Westrive to maintain a space where everyone feels comfortable, Keanu didn't link a symbol of faith makes. People uncomfortable. Carla took a breath, short, sharp, imagine. If everyone began wearing political pins, religious ideological slogans, it would create a division in a space meant for unity. Heeling forward slightly, his voice still a but. Now it carried a weight of deliberate clarity then. Maybe the problem isn't the symbol, maybe it's what people have been taught to feel about it. His words echoed louder than his voice. A couple sitting near B exchanged glances. The man subtle yangled his phone, pressing the record button without drawing attention. Carla noticing straightened her posture as if trying to regain authority through suture. I'm simply following protocol. If you refuse to cooperate, I may have to notify security now. That got attention. More heads turned. A quiet hush spread over the cabin. The kind that comes when something, real something raw, pierced through the surface of routine. But Keanu didn't flinch. He didn't raise his voice. Instead, he looked her in the eyes and said, call whoever you need to but understand this. The problem isn't what's in my chest. It's what's in your eye. Silence total. Carla stared at him, caught in the sudden mirror he held up, not with judgment but with clarity. His words were not aggressive, they were true, and that made them harder to swallow. A flight attendant further back stopped. Mid-tasked couple continued to film. One or two passengers subtly nodded, though they said nothing. The divide was forming. It wasn't between faiths or a dialoguset, was between perception and reality. Carla left away without a word, jaw clenched. She didn't know yet, but the tide had begun to turn. Keanu Dozenbakken, call whoever you need, but no. This problem isn't what's on my chest. Tist, what's in your eyes. The atmosphere in the first-class cabin had changed. Began as subtle tension. Had turned into something heavier, more electric, thickened of unspoken shift that made people sit up straighter, whisper a little less, watch a little more closely. Keanu still sat quietly in his seat, feet his silver crucifix resting on his chest undisturbed. Invisible not as a statement, but as a truth. It hadn't moved. It hadn't moved, but everyone around him had. Carla stood in the galley, arms crossed, jaw tight. She was no longer just irritated, she was challenged. Her authority had been quietly questioned. In front of the very passengers whose respect she was trained to command, she could feel the judgment pressing in from multiple directions, not only from Keanu, but from her own team and possibly herself. Her fingers tapped against the OP clipped. To her tray card uniform she wore suddenly felt heavier, unusual tighter around the collar. She took a deep breath, then turned sharply. Nicole, I need you up front with me, the ounger. Attendant blinked, unsure. Is everything all right? Carla gave a tight smile that wasn't really a smile. We have a situation I'd prefer to handle with protocol. Passenger 2 is refusing tocambly with a direct request. Escalating. Nicole looked hesitant. Is it about the necklace? Carla didn't answer directly. It's about setting a precedent. Nicole followed reluctantly back at Keanu's row. Several passengers pretended to mind their own business, eyes on books or screens. Butanchin. Elsewhere, one man near Thebelked continued to record casually with his phone, resting on the arm restangled just enough to capture the seat across the aisle. Carla returned. Tokanu's side, her stance more rigid. Than before, Nicole stood just behind her, not speaking, just watching. Mr. Reeves, Carla said louder this time, using his full name now that she'd finally recognized who he was. I'm notifying the captain. If you continue to disregard cabin expectations, we will have to take further measures, possibly even involve port security upon landing. Keanu slowly turned his gaze to her. Hearn bothered for wearing anaclace. Carla flushed for refusing a crew member's instruction. During an active flight, the words sounded official, rehearsed, but they landed like a lie in a quiet room. More passengers were visibly listening now. There was no Sanino shouting, just the unmistakable sense of a confrontation deepening in the possibility that something important was at stake. Nicole spoke gently, maybe Westhold. Talk to the captain together, Boar. It goes that far? Carla shot her a look sharp. Disapproving, but it was too late. The moment had shifted. Carla had tried to wield authority, but what she'd revolved instead was control slipping. Cockpit door opened. 5 minutes later out stepped Captain Morales, Compo Zedmod 50's face, weathered but kind, the kind-off man whose calm you could feel before he even spoke. He walked the aisle with purpose, but not haste, when he reassured thee. Galley Carla stepped forward, speaking quickly. Sir, we have a passenger refusing to comply with basic decorum. Have asked him multiple times to conceal a religious item that could disturb Thika Ben. Atmosphere. He declined. He escalated it. Morales listened without interrupting, then turned to Nicole. And what's your perspective? Nicole hesitated. Hines quiet, respectful. He didn't escalate anything, he just didn't want Towhide. His necklace. Morales nodded, then stepped into the aisle. All eyes followed him. He approached Keanu calmly, hands behind his back like a professor prepared to speak to a thoughtful student. Mr. Reeves, I'm Captain Morales. I understand there's been some disagreement regarding a policy. I want to ensure the well-being of everyone on board, crew and passengers included. May I ask for your version? Keanu looked up, expression still composed, voice steadier. Attendant asked me to conceal Thish, touched the crucifix lightly, saying it might make others uncomfortable. I said no. A pause. I told her this, Nicholas Haas. It's been part of my life for years. That's not a symbol of ideology, but off survival of faith that held me together. When nothing else did. I don't wear it to provoke. I wear it because it reminds me I'm still here. The cabin had gone Saw style. You could hear the distant click off a seatbelt buckle 3 rows awake. Captain Morales listened, and when Keanu finished, he didn't respond immediate. Instead, he looked back at Carla. His voice was low but firm. Did he say anything? Dis felt. Carla opened her mouth, but words didn't come. He turned to Nicolagan. Anything aggressive? Nicole shook her head. No, sir. Captain Morales exhaled his weight of leadership, settling in tow his next words. The cabin lights had dimmed, but for Carla, there was no rest. Stood at the back of the aircraft, fit in behind the galley curtain, phone waiting non-stop in her pocket. She hadn't opened it in the last 10 minutes. Didn't need to, she already knew. The video had gone viral, her face, her voice, her words, the way she told Keanu. Revesto hide his crucifix, all of it weighs in line, now being dissected by stranger. Stirred the world. Her chest tightened, not with panic, with something deeper. Shame, but not because of the backlash, because, she saw it to the moment replayed in her mind. Not from her perspective, but from everyone else's, from Nicole's, from Diete's, from Keanu's. She hadn't been neutral. She hadn't been fair. She had judged him quietly, and that made it worse. Amory surfaced, her grandmother's voice soft, and worn. Kindness isn't what you say, it's what you choose not to hide. Carla had spent her whole life hiding by hint, policies behind protocol, by hint, control. Now there was nowhere to hide. From the cockpit came Captain Moral's voice over Thundercom. This airline is committed to respect, inclusivity, and the freedom to express one's faith without fear or shame. It was subtle but clear. Everyone knew what it meant. Keanu sat quietly in seat 2A, still composed, the crucifix still visible. He hadn't gloated, he hadn't retaliated, and somehow that hurt more than if he had. Carla wiped under her eyes and took a shaky breath. She didn't know what she was going to sabot. She knew she had to face it. She stepped out of the galley. The walk to the front felt longer than usual. Ice lights reflected off polished seats and curious eyes as she approached Kinasra. The cabin fell into silence. Hal looked at her calm as ever. She stopped in front of him. The words didn't command, so she let her body speak. Carla slowly lowered herself to her knees. Gasps broke the silence. I was wrong, she said softly. Her voice trembled. I told myself I was protecting the cabin, that I was being professional, but I was just protecting my own discomfort. Tears welled in her eyes. I've hidden behind neutrality my whole life. I thought it made me strong, but it just made me blind. Looked up at him. I'm sorry. Keanu didn't speak for a moment, then gently hesitated and reached out his hand. She took it. He helped her up with quiet grace. The applause faded. The moment lingered. Carla remained standing in front of Keanu still, shaken, but different now, open in a way she hadn't been since she first put in the uniform. She felt raw, seen, yet strangely. Lighter, Keanu was still holding her hand, not to make a point, just to offer presence. Carla whispered almost to herself, "I don't know how Tondo what I did." Keanu looked at her with kindness. "You don't need to undo it," Harold eased her hand gently. "You facilitate that's more than most ever do." She blinked. The cabin was quiet, still watching, but now no one looked. Like they were judging her, they looked moved, keen. "You gestured to the seat beside him. Sit if you want." Carla nodded, sat for a moment, their posture no longer stiff, no longer performing. "I used to believe in something," she said softly, "before this job, before rules and scripts and fear." Keanu Reeves chooses grace over conflict, quiet faith, loud truth, flight, at an end apologize, midair, and the world watches. But Carla didn't care about the article's BAs. Something else had changed it inside her. 2 weeks later, a soft natural light streamed through the window of a modest apartment. Carla sat in front, off her phone recording a video. No makeup, no uniform, just her. In a plain t-shirt, in her hand she held the small silver crucifix Keanu had given her after theft light, the one he'd worn during it. Alsh looked into the lens. "I spent years believing professionalism meant hiding. Well, I was." She looked down at the crucifix. "But this reminded me what it means to be human." She smiled. "Today I didn't hide anymore." She paused. "Thank you, Keanu." She ended the recording, and first time in a long time, she felt wool. The camera stopped recording. Inch sat there in silence, still, holding the cross, not as a symbol of religion, but as a reminder of courage, of grace, of the power of choosing kindness over control. English auto-generated.